Nah, you know what? I need an apology from some of y'all. Who said my Batman jawline was not movie accurate? I think they based him off me. Hey guys, thanks so much for clicking on this video. My name is Chris. The Batman has now had its first weekend in theaters, making a total of $128 million in the domestic box office, showing a really good signs that we're definitely going to be getting a sequel to Matt Reeves' The Batman. And if you are someone who had seen The Batman, you might have picked up on a lot of the little hints they were giving us of what will be coming in the sequel. And that's exactly what I'm going to be doing here for you guys. I'm going to be rounding up all these interviews with director Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson, talking about what is going to be coming in the future for the Batman. There's even a couple of villains in here I have yet people to see talk about that they set up in the Batman that you might have missed. And from this point on, spoilers if you haven't seen the Batman, we also have Matt Reeves himself telling us the origin of his version of the Joker we will eventually be seeing, along with a deleted scene of Barry Keoghan's Joker that wasn't shown in theaters. So I'm gonna need you guys to give me your opinions with everything we discuss here today. Who do you think is the most likely villain that'll be showing up in the next movie? What storyline do you think they'll tackle? Any surprises? Really, I want to hear from you guys. Oh, and what's that? You checking out my light over there? Let me show this off. When you push this button, magic happens. Red lights! Alright, so starting off here with some of the villains that they have set up, one of the most common ones ever since watching the Batman that people have been pointing out is the character of Hush. This was an Easter egg laid out in the movie whenever the Thomas Wayne campaign was going on, and you literally see the words Hush on screen, and given the fact that Thomas Wayne accidentally got a reporter by the last name Elliot killed, it seemed like a clear setup that a Hush storyline was coming, and while it could very well happen, it most likely will not be in the next movie. When responding to a fan about Hush, he says, "That doesn't mean that the next one will be Hush. I just want to say there are so many, and what we would do next, what we're going to do next if we have the opportunity, is still in the planning stages. I have a lot of ideas, so please don't latch on to this and say, hey, they're doing a Hush movie." I think this is a thing that we're going to have to get used to when looking at the Matt Reeves version of the Batman movies, that just because they plant the seeds for a villain being out there does not mean they will be the main focus for the next movie or even a spin-off show. Matt Reeves is just taking some inspiration from the Batman animated series and having these villains already out there, and if he decides to, he'll put them into the spotlight. Which is why another villain that was set up in the Batman that I have yet to see anyone talk about that I feel was clear as day set up in the Batman is the character of Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. Now, no, I'm not talking about that prisoner scene where Riddler's talking to his cellmate. I know some people really think that's Two-Face there, but Matt Reeves has already said 100% without a doubt it's the Joker, literally saying, "You're right," Reeves says, "it is the Joker." But the other part of the Batman where they actually set up Two-Face here is, you gotta remember, one of the victims that the Riddler went ahead and took out in this movie was the DA, Gil Colson. And Harvey Dent's job in the Batman world usually is a DA himself, a lawyer fighting for the criminal justice system of Gotham. Now that Gotham needs a new DA, that leaves the spot wide open, so why wouldn't Matt Reeves in the second movie just have Harvey Dent cast already as the new DA for the city? There was even reports when the Batman was getting filmed that Two-Face would show up in the movie, and they had Oscar Isaac. I think he would actually be perfect for that role and could just be, again, another background Batman villain character that's a ticking time bomb waiting to have his origin made and then become a main villain somewhere down the line. Another villain that was set up in the movie that we kind of have to get out of the way, because I've been debating with fans online whether it actually was a setup or are people just coincidentally looking at something the wrong way. And that's the moment when Robert Pattinson's Batman pulls out this little green liquid from his pouch that I'm most likely saying is adrenaline, shoots himself with it, giving him that boost he needs to go ahead and fight back at the person who was hurting Catwoman. And fans have just really been stuck on the fact that that liquid was green, given that adrenaline is just usually clear. Pair that up with the fact that in the comics there have been versions where Batman uses Venom himself, and then eventually it gets into the hands of Bane where he abuses it to the level we know him today. And like I said, I was debating this for the longest time with fans going, I think it's just adrenaline, guys. But then after I did some thinking and I remembered back to the prequel novel that came out for the Batman, it mentioned that Batman actually has a real fascination with chemistry and likes creating liquids of his own. So in this universe, it could actually be Bruce who creates the Venom liquid, maybe a combination of adrenaline that isn't so harmful on your body that you could use over and over. Bane eventually will get his hands on it somehow, some way, or a criminal in Gotham, and there you go, the setup for him is out there. I'm gonna give it to you guys now. Maybe I was wrong. Just whatever you do, can you please finally make Bane a Latino? Estamos doliendo aquí. Another villain that is possibly being set up in the Batman that even Robert Pattinson has talked about in interviews wanting to happen is the Court of Owls. There was kind of a lot of talk in the Batman of this underground system that controls Gotham. In the movie, it did just turn out to be Carmen Falcone working with the police hand in hand, but fans have noticed the way Gil Colson, the DA, goes ahead and speaks about this, saying it's bigger than you could ever imagine, makes people think that they are hinting at the Court of Owls storyline. And there's really so much you could do with this. It's not just an organization of people in a white mask that have been controlling the underground of Gotham, but the Court of Owls even have their own very well trained assassins that I think would make for some amazing fight scenes between Batman. And the most devastating part about these fan theories is it could involve Batman's parents again.
I think Thomas and Martha were leaders of the Court of Owls.
I like that one. Oh, that if they disappear and kind of they're secretly running it, that would really, really be a very, very difficult thing for Bruce to handle. I was definitely kind of thinking that the Court of Owls is probably going to be in the sequel. It definitely seems
don't
like.
say it!
Well, I mean, I'm literally just guessing.
I think this is for sure going to be one they do next, but I don't know if it'll be in the next movie or if it'll be one of those things that they reveal at the end of the entire series. Before we get on to that deleted scene with the Joker and explaining his origin of how Matt Reeves is going to make him in this universe, two other Batman characters that have been talked about by Matt Reeves or Robert Pattinson that could show up in the future has me super excited because one, Matt Reeves has talked about he's very interested in doing a Mr. Freeze storyline. He has gone ahead and said, in my view, I just feel drawn to finding the grounded version of everything. So to me, it would be a challenge in an interesting way to try and figure out how that could happen. Even the idea of something like Mr. Freeze, such a great story, right? I think there's actually a grounded version of that story, which could be really powerful and could be really great. I love the fantastical side of Batman, but this iteration, obviously, while being to me, I think is very comic faithful, it doesn't lean as hard into the fantastical, I guess. But I think to me, what would be interesting would be to try and unwind that fantastical and see, well, how could you make sense here? And so that's kind of my view on how I see it. If we already have Matt Reeves admitting that he's thinking about Mr. Freeze and knows that there's a grounded version to tell his story, it seems like he's most definitely thinking about him for the sequel as the main bad guy, and we would all love to see a version of the Heart of Ice storyline told in a serious way, unlike it was in Batman and Robin. I'm just afraid that they might make him too grounded and realistic, where in this universe we might not have the guy with the freeze gun, or it might be something completely different, most likely not even having the disease that makes him only drawn to cold environments. But I'm hoping maybe Matt Reeves can stretch the grounded a little bit and just make it a little fantastical. And I guess speaking of another character, not necessarily a villain for the Batman series, Robert Pattinson has talked about wanting Robin to be included in sequels. And this is why Robert Pattinson is my favorite Batman, because his description of how he would include Robin makes me so damn excited. He says here on including Robin, yeah, but he has to be 13. That's the only way I'll accept it. No, I love Death in the Family and stuff, but I think it'd be so cool and people are so scared of it, but it's kind of exciting. I think it would be a really fun addition. And that has always been my stance on Robin. That is a character that I feel like if you ground him, make him realistic, a 13-year-old version of this kid fighting around with Batman could work. But Robert Pattinson, they're mentioning that people are so scared of it. I don't think it's fans or audiences that are scared. It's the damn studio. Warner Brothers knows the horror that was Batman and Robin in the franchise, and I think they're just so scared of adding the word Robin to anything in the franchise. But the whole point of these reboots and incarnations is to do something different, and they have yet to do a serious version of Robin on the big screen. But now finally getting down to it, Matt Reeves himself has spilled all the beans on what we can expect for the future of Barry's version of the Joker. He's informed us of a deleted scene that sounded so cool that I wish they included, and the origin that he has for this new version of the Clown Prince of Crime. And yes, I do have to point out the obvious, because there's a lot of fans vocal right now that they're not excited for a new Joker. They're kind of sick of it. They don't want more Joker. And I don't blame them. Over the past couple of years, we've gotten a lot of Jokers, but Matt Reeves himself said, it's also just a planting of the seed. It's not where the next movie's going. He says here, it's not an Easter egg scene, he says. It's not one of those end credits Marvel or DC scenes where it's going like, hey, here's the next movie. In fact, I have no idea when or if we would return to that character in the movies. That's the key word right there. Matt Reeves has said he doesn't even know if this character will be returning in the movies. It could very likely be the reason they're introducing a Joker into this universe is for a spin-off show. There's been a lot of talks of these Batman spin-off shows that have been happening behind the scenes. We already know of the Penguin series that is described to be the rising of power of Colin Farrell's Penguin. That'll be taking place directly after where the Batman ended. And the other series that we heard about for the longest time was supposed to be a GCPD show. What seems now like that Gotham Police show has now evolved into a solo Arkham Asylum TV show. Matt Reeves went ahead and commented on the evolution of the show by saying, the GCPD thing, that story has kind of evolved. We're actually now more into the realm of exactly what would happen in the world of Arkham as it relates coming off of our movie. And some of the characters almost lean into the idea of it's like a horror movie or a haunted house that is Arkham. The idea, again, the way that Gotham is a character in the movie, I really want Arkham to exist as a character. So you go into this environment and encounter these characters in a way that feels really fresh. And so in our work on Gotham, that story started to evolve and it started feeling like, wait, we should really lean into this. And that's kind of where that's gone. So with that in mind, it feels like the Joker is actually a setup so he can be a main character in this spin-off show. Matt Reeves has been quoted with calling this version of the Joker right now that we saw in the Batman as Proto-Joker. So the series could actually be his evolution, and I'm bringing back my fan theory. In the Batman, we found out Batman's mom, Martha Wayne, before she got married was in Arkham, and she has a long history of mental illness in her family, going in and out of asylums. I would not be surprised if in this version of the Batman they make it that somehow Batman and Joker are actually half-brothers, or I've even heard some people theorize and say that Joker could actually be a long-distant family member of the Arkhams, maybe the last-born son of that family before they were killed. That'll tie again to the origin part of this version of the Joker, but talking about right now this deleted scene from the Batman, Matt Reeves was going to have a scene earlier in the movie where we first got to meet the Joker before what happened to him at the end of the movie talking to the Riddler, and I wish it was something they left included in the movie. If you guys know, this movie is heavily inspired by the comic book The Long Halloween. And in that book, a killer is going around in Gotham and Batman is just trying to solve this crime, not knowing exactly who it is. Batman at one point gets so frustrated that he goes to Arkham and visits an inmate known as Calendar Man, trying to figure out if he can give him some insight on what this killer is doing. This is supposed to be a situation that very much mirrors Clarice and Hannibal Lecter, where it's a cop going to another crazy serial killer trying to get into the mindset of that person, seeing if they can predict their next move. And that's what was going to happen in the Batman. Batman was going to get so frustrated with the Riddler, not knowing what his next move was, he turned to the Joker, shedding some light if maybe he could point out what the Riddler was going to do next. And really, it was just going to be the Joker messing with Batman that entire scene. It's said at one point in this conversation that the Joker would have told Batman, it's almost our anniversary, isn't it? Hinting at the fact that yes, it is Batman who put this guy in prison. They've had an encounter before and their relationship is just barely starting. I would have loved that little tease right there. And when Batman would ask the Joker, how do you think the Riddler thinks? The Joker would have responded by saying, what do you mean you want to know how he thinks? You guys think the same, which would have been something that foreshadowed the eventual conclusion in the movie that the Riddler was actually inspired by the Batman, realizing that him being vengeance was no different than the way Riddler was trying to be vengeance for Gotham. I really wish they would have kept that, but Matt Reeves has talked about them releasing that scene after the movie, so maybe we'll get it in a couple of weeks. But ending off here with the new origin for this version of the Joker, Matt Reeves went ahead and said it's not about some version where he falls into a vat of chemicals and his face is distorted, or what Christopher Nolan did where he's some mystery to how he got these scars carved into his face. What if this guy from birth had this disease and he was cursed? He had this smile that people stared at that was grotesque and terrifying. Even as a child, people looked at him with horror, and his response was to say, okay, so a joke was played on me, and this was his nihilistic take on the world. Matt Reeves later in this interview confirms that it is a biological disease that this Joker is born with, and that's again where I'm pointing to. If they're wanting to make this a biological thing that the Joker is born into, I feel like a connection back to the Arkhams or Martha Wayne would really be a huge shock to Batman somewhere in this movie. But I do like this version of it and this new interpretation that he's just a guy born with this disease, that he has a permanent smile on his face, and he just uses that as the reason for going insane and playing a joke on other people. But that is all the stuff we know right now for what could be happening in the Batman sequel. I want to leave it off to you guys. What here that they have set up seems more likely for the future? With Matt Reeves saying that the Joker is most likely not going to be the villain for the next movie, where do you think he'll show up? Anything and everything, be sure to leave your thoughts down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.